Hello and welcome to Wide Angle. Today we focus on Afghanistan and the region. And we have a very special pair of eyes to focus on this subject of great interest to us in India and of course to the region. We have with us Robert Nicholsberg, who has been in the region since 1988 to 2000 regularly and rather more irregularly since then. He has in fact produced an amazing book, Afghanistan, and it's a remarkable pictorial, and you will see some pictures as we go along. But before we start on Afghanistan, just the other day, I had a long conversation with the Foreign Minister of Iran, Javed Zarif. He said some important things about India, Iran, and Afghanistan. Let us see what he says, and then we can make that the point of departure for a conversation with Robert.
Americans have invested a lot of force, a lot of blood, in fact, a lot of money and blood in Afghanistan. And the result is that now that they are leaving, they're leaving behind a legacy that is less than something to be proud of. Now, Afghanistan can be a much more secure country without foreign forces in Afghanistan, because foreign presence in and of itself breeds resentment, and it provides a breeding ground for extremism. So what is important is for all countries, Iran and India included, but Pakistan also, who have a stake in a stable future in our region, whether they pronounce it or not, whether they articulate it or not, all of us need stability in this region. All of us need stability in Afghanistan in order to be able to have prosperous, secure borders. So for all of us it is necessary, particularly for Iran and India, who see very similarly the future, a stable Afghanistan as in their mutual interest, to work together with the Afghan government and with the Afghan people to ensure that withdrawal of foreign forces...
What specifically can, say, Iran and India do for instance?
A couple of things. One is to ensure that withdrawal of foreign forces will be the beginning of more stability rather than a vacuum to be filled by extremists and terrorists. The other is to work together in order to improve the economic situation in Afghanistan. The war economy in Afghanistan has persisted, and the war economy produces warlords, produces terrorists, produces drug traffickers, and these in fact reinforce one another. So it is very important for Iran and India to work together in order to improve the economic situation in Afghanistan, and also create a regional mechanism for Afghanistan to live in stability with its neighbors and to live more prosperously.
You said that specifically we can do 2 or 3 things in Afghanistan. There are some other issues, not just, in fact, Chabahar is one of them. What is the status of Chabahar? That impinges entirely on our cooperation with Afghanistan.
A general scheme for cooperation between Iran and India, not only on Chabahar, which is an extremely important part of it, but on a corridor that connects India, Iran, and Afghanistan, and Central Asia, and provides a very positive contribution to the development of the entire area, but to peace and stability in the area.
Dilate on that just for a minute.
I believe it is extremely important. Afghanistan is a landlocked country. We have a number of countries in Central Asia who depend on some sort of a transit route, diversification of their means of transport and export and import. So Chabahar is strategically located. It's a project that can be the symbol of cooperation between India and Iran, and a symbol of Indian and Iranian contribution to peace and stability in the entire region. So it's an extremely important project, but that should be seen within the context of a general picture of what we want to do there. So we are going to work on Chabahar, and we are going to work on the rest of the project.
The gas pipeline?
The gas pipeline is also an extremely important project that has been, so to say, on the back burner for quite some time, but I think that also can contribute further to peace. Iran is the world's largest producer of gas, and we have a lot to offer for the future of Indian economy. And we see, and we're very happy to see, the growth in Indian industry and the growth in India, and that requires a lot of energy, and Iran is a reliable source for that. Probably for countries, you will not find a more reliable, more independent source for provision of your energy needs.
So, Bob, that is, the Iranians are now coming out of the cold, as it were, and they are now being made more clubbable. And what did you make of the foreign minister? Since our theme tonight will be Afghanistan, what did you make of his focus on the cooperative element that can be expanded between India, Iran, Afghanistan, and the region?
I think he raised some good points, particularly dealing with all countries' economies. And Afghanistan needs to build up its own infrastructure and institutions, particularly with finance and the economy. Most Afghans these days do not want to fight. They want their work, they want to maintain their houses, send their kids to school, and rebuild the country. So this would be a great help if all three countries could come together on something.
How can you think of a cooperative venture involving Iran, India, on Afghanistan without somehow bringing in Pakistan?
It's impossible to understand Afghanistan without understanding Pakistan. So obviously it has to include that country. Both borders between Afghanistan and Pakistan, Afghanistan and Iran, are strategic, and they're also very porous. So maintaining security is going to be a responsibility for all the countries involved there, as well as, in my opinion, maintaining some kind of foreign force there, not to completely disengage.
When you say foreign force, what do you have in mind?
Well, I was there in January of 1991 at the American Embassy when they lowered their flag and closed the embassy. It was one of the saddest moments I've spent really thinking about it on the spot and after of U.S. participation in the region. To close the embassy following the Soviet Army withdrawal was, in my opinion, ridiculous, insane. And look what happened after 1991. The country just went to pot. So the foreign minister discusses a potential vacuum happening there. But I don't think foreign forces should go down to zero. A wartime economy it's correct. There has been an artificial economy there. But Afghanistan cannot survive all of a sudden without foreign participation. Iran has a vested interest in the area. And in 2003, they were surrounded by U.S. forces in Iraq and surrounded by U.S. forces in Afghanistan. It was not a very good situation, in their opinion, both for foreign affairs and for their military. So, of course, they'd like to see us to leave. We've left Iraq, and look what's happened there. So by leaving, Afghanistan doesn't necessarily guarantee peace.
But is Hamid Karzai allowing you to leave?
Well, the public posturing is one thing, but the private talk, I'm sure, is going on.
What is your understanding? What is the private talk?
I'm not that privy to it, actually, Saeed, but I don't think we're going to go down to zero.
Mm-hmm. Why is Karzai? I mean, Hamid Karzai was actually a creature of Bonn in the Bonn conference. He was brought in there and he has been president. I remember there was something like 50 commandos from Wisconsin or wherever it was who secured him. He has seldom moved out of that palace in Kabul. Now, where does he derive this power from, that he's now thumbing his nose at the Americans? Is he actually thumbing his nose, or is there a fix?
I think it's posturing. I think there is an end game in sight, and pretty soon he's a lame duck, as we call him in the West. He's not running for re-election, not able to. But he's trying to guarantee some part of his future legacy there. And people in Afghanistan don't trust central government. They never have. It's urban versus rural there, and tribal as well. So he is certainly making a lot of noise, but he's also playing it in a very clever way.
Well, did you know that he was in New Delhi the other day? He's had his third child delivered in a hospital in Gurgaon. Were you aware of it?
I was aware he was in town, yes,
He was
but not
in
for that
town,
reason.
and yes, for his third baby.
Very good.
So he is quite prolific in that regard. No, you are very interesting. You see, we discuss regions like Afghanistan, and we develop an amnesia about the past. The remarkable thing I find with your book here is that it restores the past. It gives you the perspective. For instance, let me exactly tell you what I mean. You are, for example, talking about the first photograph is you have the Russian troops leaving Afghanistan. I mean, that is the perspective that you have. You were actually there.
It was one of my first trips to Kabul. Prior to the Soviet initiative to gather their forces and exit, it was very difficult to get a visa to go to Kabul as a journalist, almost impossible. Thus, most of the journalists who participated in the coverage there went in through Pakistan, over the hills, and across the border, in a way illegally. But once the visas started coming, they were issued here by the Soviet embassy. I made it a point to quickly get as many trips in as possible, and this was, of course, the first opportunity at our exposure to Soviet presence. Again, in context, this was the Cold War. Gorbachev had come in. He had already signaled their intent to leave. And as journalists, we were never able to get our hands on the narrative of Kabul, the capital, and what had happened. We had seen what was going on in the countryside, the devastation, the carpet bombing. And let's not forget, in 1979 to 1988, 1 million Afghans were killed. Killed. This is before suicide bombers. This is just targeted killings, indiscriminate killings, as well as creating 6 million refugees, 4 million and 2 million. So it was a big disruption for that country, and I wanted to get my camera there.
Well, why don't we resume your other pictures after a short break?